Good evening, Raider fans, and welcome to another edition of the Ross Raider Wrap-Up. I am Matt Harrelson. This is, of course, Dion Cranford, and we are officially done with the spring sports out at Richmond and down at the lower levels, which we're also going to talk about. But overall, before we start getting into specifics, what was your take on the sports this year?
I think as we mentioned before, Richmond athletics is just growing. It's just steadily growing. A lot of it has to do with just the general popularity. As silly as it sounds, even things like social media, the Richmond Observer, it's all contributing to the buildup of Raider athletics because it's building excitement. People are putting more time, more money, more energy, more into it, and it's showing. You can see it.
Absolutely. So let's talk about perhaps the most successful team out at Richmond, at least over the last several years, and that would be the Lady Raiders softball team. Now they finished the season 25-3. Unfortunately, lost in round 3 of the playoffs to Providence.
Yeah, and Kyle, I was talking to Kyle at the game, and he said it best. It was just an uncharacteristic night for them. Just really strange plays, drop pass, overthrown pass, or a couple of pass balls that got by the catcher, and it was just a really uncharacteristic night. And the thing is, when you get to that part of the playoffs, there really are no bad teams. Mm-hmm. So when you make those kind of mistakes and you're playing a team as good as Providence is, they're going to make you pay for those mistakes. They valiantly fought back. I think it was in the 6th inning. They were down 4-0. They valiantly fought back, scored 4 runs in the 6th to tie it up. But then Providence had a home run in the top of the 7th, and it was just real unfortunate. It was an early end for Richmond softball. I think so many people had state champion on their mind this year. This was the year they were going to do it, and to have them fall early, it was a little bit of a letdown to a lot of people. But realistically, what this team accomplished this season, you can't overlook those things. And it really wasn't a bad year. It was just a tough ending to it.
It was. And let's talk about some of the things that they actually did accomplish this season. So this was the 7th consecutive season that they were SAC conference champions. They also won the SAC tournament. That's the 2nd year in a row they've done that. They won the Beach Diamond Invitational, the first time they've done that since 2014. 21 regular season victories, the 2nd most in school history. That's a lot of accolades. So what was your takeaway from this season?
Obviously getting the win again in the conference, especially when you got teams like Jack Britt and Lumberton. We've talked about that on the show this season. Just a lot of great athletes, and with the season over, we'll be seeing the all-conference list drop from that. I expect Jack Britt and Lumberton and Richmond to be kind of the heavy representation on that. But it's a good, strong conference. They play a good, strong schedule. They had that tough loss to Marlboro Academy, but Marlboro Academy just won their state title. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, while Richmond was losing their playoff game, Marlboro Academy was winning their state title game about the same time. So, they played a good, strong schedule. Beach Diamond Invitational, I've said it over and over. I think I've even said it on here. I love that tournament. It's just great competition. They're great teams, and it's a good program builder for Richmond to be a part of. So.
It is. So as we move through these, I'm kind of gonna ask you the same question when we get done. Moving forward, I'm not sure how many Lady Raiders were losing to graduation, but how high is the ceiling for the Lady Raider program?
It's just going to keep going up, and they're only losing 3. And when I say only losing 3, I'm making it sound like that's not a bad thing. They're losing 3 really great athletes, but all 3 of them are going to college to play ball, so that just tells you again how good they are. But this program just seems to keep filtering young talent. They had a few freshman starters this year, a couple of sophomore starters this year. They've got some great talent coming up from the middle schools. I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
I don't either. Hopefully they'll keep that cycle going. Let's move down, keep with the Lady Raiders, but talk about the JV squad. Now, they finished 6-9. They dropped the first 5 games, finished 6-4 in the final 10. That upswing there at the end, is that a positive sign moving forward for them?
It is, but I've told a lot of people not to read too much into that because, again, the varsity team had so many young players that would have probably been on JV. Mm-hmm. There's not too much to read that. They're using the JV program for what it's meant to be, and that's to build. They're not looking for wins; they're looking to build. And right. a lot of these girls actually got a lot better as the season went on. And you're going to see a couple of them probably plug in a few of these holes on the varsity level next year. I have no doubt. There's 2 or 3 of them that you'll see on the varsity level next year. So it wasn't a bad season for JV. It was a good building year, and you saw a lot of development. And you saw those players get a lot better as the season went on. So I think we got a lot to look forward to as far as
Yep.
coming up from the JV program.
Future is bright on that side of the ball. So let's head from, stay on the diamond, but head from the women's side to the men's side. Raider baseball also finished up. They had a 19-9 overall season. Unfortunately, they bowed out early as well in the playoffs, lost 3-1 to the Huff High School Huskies, I believe it is, in round 2. So talk about that for just a minute.
Well, first of all, beautiful campus they have up there. I don't think that school's very old, but I mean, it's just, you can tell they put a lot of money into it. Very nice atmosphere, very nice program they got up there. Again, very similar to the way the Lady Raiders lost. It was very uncharacteristic, a lot of errors. Richmond only gave up one hit in that game and lost 3-1. A lot of errors, a lot of field. Yeah, I mean, some of it was just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. They were just kind of off that night, and then there were several plays that were just out of their control. I remember one just really textbook ground ball to Hunter Paris, who was playing third base at the time. He was into position to make the grab. It hit a clump of dirt and it just shot off in a different direction, and that would have been out number 3. And then later, Huff scored a run. Just silly things like that. Garrett Richardson lost one in the sun out in right field. He just couldn't see it. I mean, the sun was just in his face, and he dropped one, and then Huff ended up scoring one after that, and that would have been out number 3 in the first inning. So, I mean, it was just little things like that just messed him up. And unfortunately, even Ricky Young said at the beginning of the season, before the season was started, this wasn't going to be a big hitting team.
Right.
So the problem is, if you're not a big hitting team, you can't get yourself into holes. And unfortunately, they just did. They had a lot of unfortunate situations. I think Richmond out hit them like 7-1 or something. Yeah. I mean, it was a game that all the stats pointed to Richmond winning, but they just came up on the wrong end of it.
Yeah, and speaking of Coach Young, I know something Ricky and his staff pride themselves on usually is stellar defense, and that's something that they were trying to do all season long. Things like that, they tend to happen in baseball more than other sports. Losing a pop-up in the sun, that sort of something hits a clump of dirt on a ground ball. It's kind of like turnovers in basketball and football. You just can't do them if you want to win a ball game.
Well, and another thing a lot of people have to consider, I was saying they're a little bit off, but 2 nights or 3 nights, I guess to say, before that, in the first round, they played R.J. Reynolds. That game went 12 innings. And, we had 3 pitchers on the mound. We had guys rotating in and out. And, I mean, it's going to be tough to bounce from something like that and then play a good team who had a bye in the first round, and come in fresh. And so, I mean, that probably had a lot to do with it anyway, because Huff was definitely a much cleaner, sharper team that night. I would be willing to say, based on what I saw, if Richmond and Huff played 10 times, Richmond would probably win 8 of them. You know what I mean? I think Richmond was the better team. It was just an off night.
So let's talk about those pitchers, because I know we've said it several times throughout the season. Coach Young talked about it before the season started, was that pitching by committee that they were going to see. And as we've got here on the notes, 5 different Raider pitchers recorded wins this season.
Yeah, Hunter Paris, of course, leading the way in that category, but Cameron Caraway, Tyler Bass, Evan Hudson, and Luke Presler all had wins this season, and those are the 5 that I tallied through basically just my mind going back through the season. So I'll be honest with you, there may be one I missed there, because I know there were a couple other ones that actually pitched some games. But, to have that many guys come in, I even said, I think on our last episode, that game where Evan Hudson pitched against Terry Sanford, and Terry Sanford's still playing. They've only lost 2 games this season. They're still playing. That was a huge win and a big win for him and, just as a team. But to show that Evan Hudson wasn't even one of the starting probably 2 or 3 pitchers to come in and beat, a team that was undefeated at the time, it just shows how deep this pitching lineup was. And they had each other's back, and I can't say enough. He said they were going to pitch by committee, and they did. They did really well.
They absolutely did. So throughout this season, 19 victories for the Richmond Raiders baseball team. That's their most since they had 20 back in 2016. Finished second place in the SAC, best conference finish, also since 2016 when they finished first. We just talked about the pitching by committee. Here's something that's important, though. 12 seniors going to be leaving the program. How big of a chunk is that going to take out for next year?
Well, I think you just scrap the program and start all over again. No, they had some young guys that were playing this year. Not many. You got to think you only need 9 for a game.
Yeah.
And when you got 12 seniors in the rotating in, it's going to be interesting. The JV program, they didn't have a bad season, so you're going to have a lot of those guys kind of filter up. And then we'll talk about a little bit about one of the middle school teams that actually had a good season. The athletes are there. I don't know, and this will be more of a Ricky Young question. I don't know if next year's going to be more of a building season or if they've really got the athletes to just really step up into those roles and take over. And as you can see, kind of now we have some of the JV stats from the season of some of those guys that'll be coming up. So.
Yeah, so as you can see there on the graphic, the JV squad finished 14-4 this season, 8 more victories than they did just last year. Champions themselves of the SAC. They also had a pitch by committee, and you can see the names up there, and then averaged just over 7 runs per game. That's putting up a lot of scoring, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're talking about, all the seniors graduating from the varsity team, but if you look at that pitch by committee, that's 3 freshmen and a sophomore. So the good news is they have guys at least taking the place of some of the, because most of our pitchers were seniors, and I mean that's going to be a big role to fill. And we've got some guys that actually had some success this season at the plate. They did well. I feel like pitching was good. I'm wondering if maybe defensively they could have done a little bit better, because they did give up a lot of runs. I think maybe averaged about 3 runs per game or runs allowed, but they did really well at the plate. They had, I want to say, maybe 6 or 7 games where they scored 10 runs or more. So, I mean, good season for them.
All right. And you kind of touched on with baseball, what the ceiling is going to be for them moving forward. Richmond's obviously not the only high school that has to deal with kids graduating and leaving. No. So we're not the only team, obviously, that's got to deal with that moving forward.
I don't think I've seen, you're right, but I don't think I've seen such a huge,
Yeah, 12 is a lot.
85% of your team is leaving. It's going to be interesting to see how they replace a lot of those.
It will, but I'm sure Ricky and his staff is up to the task.
Oh,
so. Let's talk about soccer. The Richmond Raiders soccer team also had a really good season. Finished 15-5, second in the SAC. That's their best finish since 2004. 13 different Lady Raiders scored, led by Jesse Graham and Caitlin Huff. 13 goals for Graham, 12 for Huff. So great season for them, right?
Yeah, I mean, a really good season, and we talked about it before. Unfortunately, the way they've restructured the schedule with soccer being played on the same night as baseball and softball, we don't get to look as much at soccer as we did in the past. But I did go to a few of their games this year, and like I said, there's a lot of talent. Unfortunately, they're graduating, I think, 11.
Whew.
So, I mean, big graduation there as well. But there were a lot of young players. There were a few freshmen that got some starts. And, as you mentioned, Caitlin Huff, who is a freshman herself with the second highest score on the team. But you are going to lose some very important players off that team. And I don't know. I mean, I think one of the things I liked about this team is they won a lot of clutch games, especially against Pernell Sweat, against Jack Brick, games that really came down to the wire, or maybe even went into penalty kick scenario. They pulled those games out. They didn't lose those games, and that's going to be big going forward in terms of what they can handle and what they can manage in the games. And
looking at the graphic here, JV team also finished second in the SAC, and they shut out 10 opponents. So perhaps we're talking about losing 11 girls off the team. Maybe there's some people to fill in those blanks too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and we've talked about it. It's just a matter of filling in those gaps of the ones that are leaving. I think the biggest issue is, especially with soccer and baseball, you just have such a huge exodus. You wonder if you've got enough of those athletes that can really step up and fill those holes, but we'll see soon.
So let me ask you this. This was Chris Larson's first full season. He's now done. He did the boys in the fall, the girls here in the spring. After Benny Howard being there for, 30 seasons, something like that, what's your takeaway on Chris's first season?
Well, I mean, it's fun to see, an alumnus come in and take over that role, because he really not only has the talent and the ability to coach these athletes, but he also has that motivation and that school spirit, because he wants Richmond to win because it's Richmond, and he's doing a fantastic job. I mean, the records, we're probably in a tougher conference now than we were just a few years ago in the Southeastern Conference. And his teams are holding their own. Yep. So, I mean, it's impressive to not only take over those programs, but to take over in probably a more difficult circumstances and to do well. So.
It is. 15-5, a good season for the Lady Raiders soccer team. Let's head back to baseball. Let's head down a level to the middle schools. Rockingham at Carver. I know Carver came in number 1. I think perennially everybody thought they're the team to beat. Rockingham said, hold on one second, beat them 3-2. So that was kind of an upset, wasn't it?
They did. It was funny because Kyle went to those games, and he messaged me letting me know I was there, and I said, I don't think you're going to have a good day, because Carver's baseball and softball teams are just so good and they don't lose. And, I remember him texting me later on and said Rockingham won. I said, no, no, they didn't. But I got to give Rockingham credit, just as a school in general, because for so many years they were just the top dog. And this year, when they got to the playoffs, none of their 4 teams, boys soccer, girls soccer, softball, or baseball, was the number 1 seed. They were all lower, and they all had to be the underdog and come back. And they all made it to the title games. Yeah. All 4 of them did. Unfortunately, Rockingham's softball team failed, but, this was a huge win for Rockingham. Just ended a long winning streak for Carver and just ended Carver's dominance over this area, because they just don't lose in baseball or softball.
Yeah, and as you got here in the notes, they snapped Carver's 28-game winning streak dating back to 2017, and you can see some of the stats there. The Rockets scored 1 run on an Ethan Clayton 2 RBI single and 2 more runs on Carver errors. Are they kind of like Richmond? They don't usually make too many errors, do they?
Well, they don't make too many errors, but it is middle school, so you do see a little more of that.
That's true.
And to be fair to Rockingham, Rockingham's scores on those errors were set up by big plays. I think one of them had a double to set it up, and there was some good base running, and they put themselves into position to score those runs. It was just a big win. Somebody actually recorded the entire game, so I actually got to see it even though I couldn't go. And they played really well. Great pitching. I got to give the pitching. I'm thinking Seagraves. I apologize, I forgot his first name, but came in and closed that game out. Yeah, there you go. Just a phenomenal pitching job there against a team that usually bats really well and is usually scoring high. So
of course, big thing expected moving forward for Rocket baseball. So let's stay down at the middle school level, but let's head back to soccer and talk boys soccer. Rockingham at Ellerby for another title, and the Rockets won this one too, 2-1.
They did. Kyle and I were both at this one, and it was a good one. Good day for soccer, but unfortunately, this time it was 2 in-county teams, so one of them had to follow. Yeah. Unfortunately, and I think a lot of the underdog people were kind of pulling for Ellerby, because Ellerby's never been able to win this, let alone sweep it in the boys and girls. But it was Rockingham and Ellerby in both of those games, and both of those games ended up going into shootouts at the end of the game. They both ended up tied 1-1, and as you can see here, the boys game ended up going into a shootout, and the Rockets won 3-2 in that one.
Yeah, so Carlos Vargas from Rockingham and Kevin Cortez from Ellerby scored the game's goals in regulation. Chris Lopez, Jed Davis, and Andrew Conyers netted Rockingham's 3 shots in the shootout. So, of course, congratulations to them as well. Not to be outdone, let's talk about the Lady Rockets in soccer. They were also playing at Ellerby. They also won 2-1.
Yeah, same situation.
Yeah.
That one ended regulation in 1-1 tie. This one actually ended up a tie in the shootout. It was 2-2 at the end of the 5-shot shootout, and then it went into sudden death. And that's actually where Rockingham got the 3rd goal and won. And it set off a celebration. It was intense. You could have heard a pin drop when those penalty kicks were being made, and it was such a big game, and it's such an exciting game. And Ellerby went into their final game of the season, regular season, undefeated, 8-0, I believe it was, or 9-0, I can't remember. And they lost up at Spring Hill, but they still went in as the number 1 seed. And I think a lot of people, like I said, were kind of pulling for them, but Rockingham played that underdog role, stepped up, and won the game.
So obviously a lot of congratulations for the Rockingham Rockets all across the board. And just to shout out some of the names there, Ava Thompson from Ellerby, Evie Ray Howell from Rockingham were the ones that scored the game's goals in regulation. Then during the shootout, Carter Walker, Gabby Lutz, and Alex Poplin netted Rockingham's 3 shots there. So
and just to say one more thing, we were talking about Richmond soccer season and who was going to fill those 11 roles, and I was going to come back to that. I wanted to say that Ellerby and Hamlet's soccer teams, girls soccer teams, tied for first in regular season. They each only had 1 loss. And then Rockingham's soccer team won the title. Right. So your top 3 teams, all with, 1. Well, I think Rockingham lost 2 during the regular season, but they came back and won. So all with 2 losses or less and to each other.
Yeah.
So big, that says a lot of good things. You're used to seeing Rockingham and Hamlet kind of dominate the sports world, but with Ellerby stepping up and getting into a couple of title games, it makes things exciting.
Could be a dogfight moving forward.
Yes, it could.
All right, let's talk about some former Raiders who are always doing big things. Let's start first with Ethan Balcom. Of course, former Richmond Raider baseball player, was announced as the Peach Belt Conference Player of the Year for the UNC Pembroke Braves.
He was, and that was exciting. You know, we've been following him all season. He's doing big things, and he's been making himself noticed by pretty much everybody. I mean, I've seen him in all the media. I've seen him at least in all the Division II stuff. So it was a big accomplishment for him to not only earn the all Peach Belt Conference team, but to actually be named the Player of the Year. So.
Yeah, and just some of his stats here. You can see 71 RBIs, which actually leads Division II. 20 home runs, a personal best for him. 306 batting average, 29 extra base hits, 57 runs scored. Those are big numbers. And as you can see beside him, not to be outdone, Owen Bowers doing big things as well in the Suncoast Conference. She also made first team All-Conference, first team All-State, 75 RBIs to go along with 16 home runs and a .412 batting average. So both of these guys and girls rather, doing big things.
Well, I mean, and I'm not surprised. You know, I saw both of these athletes play in high school. You know, Ethan Balcom actually was with Richmond in their last state title series, and Owen Bowers, of course, was on the team last season that went to the past 2 seasons that went to the regional series. So it's no surprise their accomplishments in high school has just kind of transferred over into college. And Owen Bowers put FSW, but that's Florida Southwestern State for anybody that's curious and wants to kind of keep up with her. But it's been fun to follow him this season too. You know, Owen's parents have been online, you know, and everything she does, you know. Right. So we've been all following that and getting all excited. But it's great to see, you know, athletes leave Richmond and continue to do great things.
Absolutely, and congratulations to them. So before we end the show, talking about people that have left the program, let's talk about those that are still here. The spring sports are over with, so you put out a poll asking people who their favorite athlete was from this school year. So how'd that turn out?
Well, it was an Instagram poll. I just thought I'd give it a try and see how it will, and it actually got a lot of votes. I think we ended up with about 7,000 votes overall. Now, a lot of those were repeat votes, but if you we're going to pull up the results from that here, but the athlete receiving the most most votes was Grayson Way. Okay. So not a huge surprise there. So congratulations to Grayson. Second was Savannah Lampley. Then Hunter Hancock, Ellie Buck, and Cameron Way were your top 5 vote getters. Now, we kind of split that up. Those were the top 5 receiving the most votes. And then I also did a top 5 of the ones that received the most unique votes. So basically the people that voted, you know, that got the most individual people voting for them. And finishing first in that one was actually Ellie Buck. Okay. Savannah Lampley second. Caleb Hood, which I knew that would kind of pull in the football players with that, viewing it that way, was third. Taylor Young fourth. And Xavier Pettigrew and Jake Ransom tied for 5th.
All right, so kind of getting a little mix of different sports there. That's good to see too.
We are. I was, you know, when it started, it was very spring sport heavy, but that's because we're in the spring sports, and that didn't really surprise me. So when I started looking at the unique voters, it kind of spaced it out. So I like that a little bit better. So.
All right, sounds good. And you said, is that poll closed now? No more voting?
Oh yeah, that poll's closed.
All right.
I said I'd get the results on the show. So
but I'm sure we'll put up some other polls as we move through the summer. So and you know what? Spring practice has already started for Raider football. You know, the fall will be here again before you know it, and we'll be doing this for the fall sports again. So,
so this really is the Raider wrap-up then, huh?
It is. This is literally the Raider wrap-up. So, with that being said, let's end the show. That is Dion Cranford. I am Matt Harrelson. We appreciate you tuning in to the Raider wrap-up and all of the RO sports shows each and every week. And I guess we'll see you next time in the fall. Have a good night.